Welcome everyone to part 2 of the Soulthirst Tornado Shot build showcase. We're going to be taking a look at a more medium budget friendly approach here. I'm going to show you guys exactly what I've been doing as I've moved forward into medium budget territory, and I was a little surprised about the fact that I had to even come out with this video so quickly. I was not planning to make this video so soon, but I actually ran into a bit of a problem, and that problem is that I farmed up so much currency so quickly that I'm basically bypassing the medium budget territory and I'm going straight into high budget territory. Case in point, I have enough currency to purchase an omniscience now if I liquidated a few things. And that's just not going to work for a medium budget build because that's beyond medium budget territory right now with the price of omniscience. And yeah, so I actually had to do a little bit of maneuvering with my gear to get it back into a medium budget territory, and realize that I absolutely have to push this video out right here and now, or else it's going to be too late. And I think there's quite a few of you, based on the reception that I got on that first lower budget video, there's quite a few of you who are eager to see how I'm moving forward with this build. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to go into the gear, obviously, the links. Some of those things have changed. The player passives and the Atlas passives to a lesser extent. There aren't too many major changes on that. And then, of course, I will showcase a cemetery map because that's all I've been doing, is farming like 10 to 12x an hour in the cemetery. I'm not even playing the game full time, and I've made more videos than I expected to make, so I've actually farmed much less than I would have preferred at this point into the league. We're at the middle of day 9 right now, so that's where we are at. One major concern that I've seen from people, besides, all the overwhelming positive remarks that I've gotten off of that first video, there has been a few concerns about bossing damage. I did make it fairly clearly in that video, but I do want to reiterate right here. The bossing damage on this build is abysmal in a vacuum. It's only like 500k to 1 million DPS, and the build is not particularly tanky, especially in like a single target bossing situation. So much of this build relies on momentum and the way Soulthirst reacts. Now we're using inspired learning. That's another major change, so there's a lot of momentum in that. There's also momentum in other defensive ways, so like the endurance charges, for example. So a great deal of this build success relies on the sort of dynamic of mapping, killing things quickly, moving through a map quickly, and it all works very well together. So if you try to transplant that playstyle, that very tactically oriented playstyle, and then just throw yourself into, I don't know, a feared invitation or something, you're going to get walloped. Don't even try it. Just buy the invitations if you really must. I went without my Atlas completed until today, as a matter of fact. I finally went ahead and bought the carries, and I did clear many of the maps myself because I know how to kill a map boss very quickly by utilizing the Soul Eater buffs from the Soulthirst belt and take them into a map boss and do them. But I didn't try to do any of the invitations, with the exception of the formed. I did go ahead and do the formed because I knew that one is fairly easy, and I did want to test myself to see if I could at least do that invitation. The answer is yes. It was a somewhat challenging fight. Did take longer than I care to admit, but I did manage to get it done pretty well. So I guess we're already looking at my Atlas passives here. It has filled out somewhat. I went ahead and left 6 points blank because in a medium budget scenario, you probably haven't even filled out your Atlas left. This is kind of what it looked like for the past 3 days or so. 2 or 3 days, basically. I guess it's only been 3 days since I came out with that first video, hasn't it? That's how quickly I have to come out with a medium budget. I suspect you guys are moving forward pretty quickly too, as a matter of fact. So yeah, I realized just now one thing I need to do is I need to get a couple of sentinels in here, because we're back to running sentinels. Doesn't really matter which ones I put in there for the showcasing of the build. So we got those in there. That's good. Let's talk about the first, probably the most important upgrade you do after the sort of 3 to 4x budget, low budget, is that you're going to want to buy yourself a 3x inspired learning. I assume it's 3x now. Now, I went ahead and bought mine for 4x because I really like having good corrupted implicits. So that is, getting this corrupted implicit is not supremely important. You see, I have plenty of mana reservation already, so you don't have to do this. But I like setting myself up for the future, so I went ahead and bought a 4x inspired learning with the reservation skills. Let's see, I have swapped a few things around, though I actually need to talk about my gear before I really talk about that. So let's get into it. The other major change, this would probably be major change number 2, is made a grand shift from pure elemental to physical to element conversion. And this is done through Anomalous Tornado Shot, which automatically converts 60% of your physical damage to random ailment if you have it qualitied up to 20. The other 40 can either come from a Watcher's Eye, which is a little bit beyond our budget right now, or it can come from this particular notable here, which is really nice, and that it already has some game physical. It's extra cold, and the Mastery allows you to convert the other 40%, perfect whole number, over into cold damage. So that allows us to have a 100% physical to element conversion. 60% of it is random element, which makes Trinity support work extremely well. There's absolutely no issues with Trinity support. It will work perfectly with this setup. We now have it. We already had a 6th link. I think the 6th link is exactly the same, except I have dropped greater multiple projectile support and picked up Awakened Vicious projectile support. So this is one of the strongest physical damage gems in the game, and it's really good for a setup for a Fizz to element conversion, in my opinion. Greater multiple projectile support is almost on par with this gem right now. You could honestly keep that one in if you wanted to, but the second you start getting more projectiles, you're going to prefer Vicious projectile support. And the fact that we're running Inspired Learning, I know there are at least 2 stolen Arch Nemesis buffs that give you additional projectiles. I think one of them gives you 2 additional projectiles, and the other one gives 5 additional projectiles, if I remember correctly. So if you steal that buff, you're going to really rather prefer just to have the extra raw damage, because it will dilute the effectiveness of greater multiple projectiles support. So that is why I suggest going Vicious projectile support. So we have a Lion Eyes Glare. Now, why have I chosen this bow? The damage is not that great, but it has a couple of very interesting suffix modifiers or special modifiers on it. You can, if you want, go for a more traditional, higher damage physical bow. You'll be hard-pressed to find one that has stats much better than this, especially if it has extra arrows, either 1 or 2, and for it to be within a medium budget range. So I'm pretty sure to get a bow that's better than this really much at all, you're having to spend multiple exalts for it. And if you want one that looks significantly better than this, you're looking at well over like 10 or 20 exalts for it. So again, we're trying to, within the spirit, keeping things in the spirit of a medium budget, this is kind of what we're working with. I do need to talk for a split second here about these 2 special modifiers. They really help elevate the quality of this bow beyond what many people think it is. So this is basically a bow that costs almost nothing. This one is very well rolled. The attack speed is obviously a really important roll on here. It can range greatly between 10 and 20%. This is local attack speed, shoots you up to 1.74 attacks per second. This is a huge impact on something like Soulthirst, which then increases your global attack speed immensely. So having that local attack speed be as fast as it is, really nice. The mana roll doesn't really matter at all. Hits cannot be evaded means I can completely ignore accuracy rating. Think about that. That's a pretty big deal. I do not have to run a precision, so I get to remove precision. And then I also don't need to take any accuracy wheel things here at all, like this. And by the way, when you're running Soulthirst, global increased attack speed is greatly diluted. So even on the even on the passive skill tree, just normal percent increased attack speed is actually much less valuable for this build than it is for your average bower build. So I don't need acuity. I get very little out of that. Master Fletcher, get very little out of that. And so I decided to put those points rather in crit here, because we're going to get more out of crit in this case. I wouldn't necessarily choose to roll crit, but it just seems to be the best options at this point. And of course, I do need to have 4 notables to activate the Inspired Learning. We're running no Watcher's Eye, we're running no Lethal Pride, no Brutal Restraint, so got plenty of options for the jewels, and it's pretty simple to do that. I've got this funny little jewel up here. This jewel is not all that great, but I go ahead and run it when I haven't put the extra 2 points over there. We have upgraded the medium cluster jewels. They are worth about, well, they cost me about 1 exalt each. I bought the base, it was much less than 1x, and then I simply just alked and scoured until I got something decent. Basically, I'm looking for 35% increased effect plus 3 other things that are decent. In this case, actually, Distilled Perfection is the one notable that's actually worth keeping, and it's pretty good. But I'm perfectly satisfied with the way these rolled. I do recommend going for 84, item level 84 plus bases and getting that 35% increased effect. So you can get really nice small node value out of this 8% increased flask duration. Very nice. The Replica Conqueror's efficiency still in there. Mantra of Flames, you do want Corrupted Blood immunity somewhere. You can get it on any one of these jewels, really. You can even get it on Inspired Learning for like 5x, actually. Total. Yeah, so that is a big deal about not having to run Precision. It actually enables us to get Hatred as an extra aura that we didn't have before. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Far Shot is another big thing I have to discuss. So I don't want to go too far into the math here, but we are running Point Blank, and then we're running Far Shot on top of that. Now, Point Blank and Far Shot to some extent cancel each other out, but actually the downsides on each of those are less than the upside. So all in all, your damage increases across the board a fairly significant amount. I estimate roughly a 20% damage increase from adding Far Shot on there. I know that may seem a little high to you, but you can find some graphs on that if you want to see what the combination of Far Shot and Point Blank looks like. Yeah, it looks like an average of about 20% increased damage, whether it's like kind of close range, medium range, or long range at that point. So you can kind of imagine that having the luxury of not having to get accuracy on your gear and having a kind of a roughly a 20% more damage really does crank up the value of this bow quite a bit, especially since the bow is extremely cheap. The only real expense on it is trying to get like a Hillock 30% from the Mastermind mission, and then getting it actually 6-linked, which I budget somewhere around 4 to 5 exalts in total to do that. I went ahead and did it the hard way. I got extraordinarily lucky. It took me 4 Jeweler's Orbs to 6-socket, and it took me 3 Orbs of Fusing to 6-link this. And I had plenty to spare. I actually made it myself ready to have to spend a great deal of these to get it 6-linked, and go figure, because I overly prepared for the worst case scenario. The best case scenario occurred for me. Speaking of 6-links, or rather not 6-links, is our this thing right here. So I am still running Daros's Defiance. It's fairly well rolled. The increase in onslaught effect roll matters quite a bit. It rounds down to the nearest 5 percentile, so 97 is the same as 95, 99 is the same as 95, 94 is the same as 90, so don't worry too much about that. But you do want, I think, at least 90% on there. The max life and increased armor evasion rolls are nice, but they don't matter too much. I do suggest getting one with a good base. This is actually a 100% tile base, so if you're going to roll it yourself, you probably want to start with a good base. And the 5-link is identical. I think it's identical to what I had before. Added cold damage support's actually pretty good here. It helps you get some more freezes out. The majority of your damage is from self-cast here in the 6-link. Around a quarter or maybe a third of your damage potentially comes from the Focus Ballista setup here. But let's be serious, you're not going to have those Ballista Totems out at all times. This is how fast we're moving through the map here. Next item let's talk about is the Gull. Now, this is the same, basically the same as I had before, except it is now double corrupted. It does not need to be double corrupted. It just needs 1 corruption. There's only 1 corruption on here that is really valuable. That is the cost and reservation multiplier. The combination of being able to drop precision and get this corrupted enchant, which makes this this helmet now cost about 1x. The combination of that allows us to switch out from Herald of Ice to Hatred. We don't want to run Herald of Ice anymore. We want to run Hatred with a Fizz to element conversion, especially prioritizing Fizz to cold. Hatred is extremely strong and something you absolutely do not want to skip out on. It's a lot of extra damage there. So you want to run Hatred, and you still want to run Grace, Determination, Defiance Banner. We never not want to run those. That's why I'm able to get away with calling this a not glass cannon build, because I'm using the Holy Trinity of defensive auras, and we got a whole lot of other stuff defensive going for us as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more. A few of the items did not change at all. The gloves, this ring, and this amulet are identical the same. The boots are also the same. However, I did actually upgrade these boots to a new enchant. So what I did is I sold my old boots and I bought new boots that already had the enchant on it. I paid almost nothing extra for that process. I do really like this enchant. It helps you move faster in your hideout, helps you move faster when you're looting and there's no monsters around. I think it's a really smart idea. I believe I also have a brand new corruption on my Soulthirst. Now, since Soulthirst is such an unpopular build and such an unpopular belt, you can get premium corruptions on there. You can even get a decent double corruption on this for relatively cheap. I paid 20 or 30 chaos for this, I think, so it wasn't that big of a deal. My other ring has had a significant upgrade to it. This is an extremely well-rolled ring. I think a little bit beyond the budget of what I would suggest you do for a medium budget. I spent 2x on this ring for its base, and then I had to pay 2x for a metacraft as well. And then I also Redeemer slammed it, so I spent about 5x and re-rolled it through Harvest Crafts. I spent about 5x on this ring. I would honestly only budget 1, maybe 2x for this. You can get basically the same rolls on here, not counting the Redeemer roll, which didn't end up being that good anyway. You can get the same rolls on here with like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 tiers less. And yeah, you're only going to have to pay like half an X, maybe upwards of 2x at the most for that. The quiver. My quiver is also a little bit better than I would budget for the medium budget. Remember how I said, I have to push this video out before I keep getting more and more gear upgrades? I do have another idea for you though. This is actually a really good quiver that you can use in place. If you're having a hard time finding a really good rare quiver, I suggest getting a signal fire. It really does need the enchant bows, attacks with additional arrows. We're talking here about another item that is extremely unpopular, even though in its own right, it does have some pretty incredible mods. It has 50% fizz converted as fire. So what that does, first of all, what that does is if you're under leveled, and let's say you're only level 91, you have 4 points you could get rid of, because that quiver covers the mastery that you really need for the full 100% conversion. You would actually have 110% conversion, which would end up being still just 100% conversion. And then a lot of the damage that is on my quiver gets completely replaced by one line here. It says gain 35% of physical attack damage. It's extra fire damage. That stat is extremely valuable. That's one of the big reasons we want to run inspired learning, because despite Arch Nemesis buffs not helping out a lot of builds the way it used to, there are still, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 13 stealable Arch Nemesis buffs that each give you 50% physical attack damage gained as extra elemental damage, which synergizes terrifically with this build and with this setup. Okay, so yeah, this quiver, perfectly good option. There are actually multiples of these on the market right now, but there's not a huge supply of them. If people suddenly tried to buy signal fires with this implicit corruption on them, they would run out in fairly short order. But in all honesty, you could have a more traditional high damage life extra arrow quiver that's not nearly as well rolled as mine for about a 1, maybe 2x budget. I think that's perfectly fine. I'm budgeting somewhere around 8, 9, or maybe 10 exalts in total for the gear specifically. Now the flasks I have are basically the same, except I did substitute one sapphire flask for another sapphire flask. We're now going with a unique sapphire flask. Why? Well, mainly because of the gain 15% of physical damage as extra cold damage during flask effect. It's a huge damage increase. Also, 15% of physical damage from hits taken as cold is honestly terrific in its own right. A very nice extra defensive layer on top of our Holy Trinity, Grace, Determination, and Defiance banner. And yeah, and we're still kind of fitting the theme of getting virtually no resistance on our gear without any flasks up. I'm sitting here with 5% fire resistance, lightning resistance, and 40% cold resistance thanks to the gull only. And so when I use all of my flasks, I shoot to the moon. I'm way beyond, like even if I was cursed with elemental weakness, I'd still be over capped. So that's how we're doing that right there. So you really do need, with this medium budget setup, you still kind of need, the bismuth flask, the sapphire, topaz, and ruby flasks. to cover your end. And honestly, spell damage is still kind of one of the more dangerous things while you're mapping, especially with Eater of Worlds altars. So yeah, I recommend keeping that intact there. Fortunately, the Taste of Hate still lasts a really long time. It cannot quite last as long as Topaz and Ruby, but it's so long that it still works pretty well while mapping. Now you'll see that I have these Enkindling Orb enchants at absolute top notch. I do think you can budget in getting experimenters on all of these flasks. That's a tier 1 increased duration modifier. You really do want these fast. I do think you should get the Hillock 28% craft at least on your longest lasting flask, the one that initiates Soul Eater buff. I definitely recommend getting in on the Quicksilver flask as well, but the other 3 you don't really need to worry about it terribly much, I think. The flask budget there is, we're looking at somewhere, you know, if you're not terribly worried about the suffix tiers, just worried about the tier 1 experimenter roll prefix, and not like 99 plus increased duration on the Enkindling Orb, but just making sure you get an increased duration roll on your flask. I think you're looking at around a 3x, between 2 and 3x spent all on your flasks there. So you can see there we're already getting kind of close to that 15x mark in this medium budget suggestion of mine. Let's talk about the gem links here. Now, I have went ahead and kind of ahead of time. I didn't really necessarily have to do this, but I decided I wanted to go ahead and get all of my gems switched over to their alternative quality and awakened qualities types. So, and also get 21 level gems where I could, where they're fairly cheap. So I went ahead and spent quite a bit on gems, more than you need to really on this budget. But you can see kind of what the plan is here. You don't necessarily have to go awaken gems at this point. I don't think it's particularly necessary. You don't have to start buying 2120 gems. You don't have to be using Divergent Anomalous, gems. You don't have to be blowing multiple exalts on single gems. You don't need to do that. But what you do need is you need to have Anomalous Tornado Shot. That's the one you do absolutely have to have. I recommend doing Anomalous Hatred. It is pretty cheap and does give you a little bit of extra bonus, increased freeze and chill duration. And I do recommend this one too. So actually, one mistake, or one regret, if you will, on the travel skill that I showcased for the lesser budget, I think you should get this gem immediately. I think she should not use Frostblink. You should do Divergent Dash. I suggested in that first video, had a little bit of an issue with phasing, not being able to phase through the map. So this helps solve some of that problem, and I definitely think Divergent Dash is a good bet to do. I personally like Frostblink better than Dash. It just feels a little bit smoother to me, but phasing's so good. So I recommend that at the very least you upgrade the Tornado Shot. You obviously have to upgrade Tornado Shot to Anomalous, and then you get Divergent Dash. And everything else you can kind of leave to normal quality. If you want, you can start changing some things out. Just copy what I've been doing. I'm copying what I did last league, basically, and those were the best gem slots available at the time, to the best of my knowledge. Okay. No changes to the Sentinel setup, I don't think, unless maybe a dig change, actually, because I think I might have dropped that and then picked up the bottom one. Anyway, you can snapshot that in there. It looks like what it does there. Okay, so that should be it for the gear, the passives, I think. No, we do actually have to still go over the passives. The passives here look pretty much the same. I did talk a little bit about going crit here because we no longer need accuracy. I did have to pick up, let's see, this to get, I actually have 101% spell suppression right now, so I can't think there's, oh, I'm sorry, right here, here's a big one. So I did have 40% increased effect non-damaging ailments. Now we have a much better mastery as an option for this elemental mastery. It's gained 10% physical damage as extra of a random ailment. Yes. Oh, and I didn't actually mention this. It should be pretty obvious. The two cheap medium cluster jewels I had right here and then right here has now been socketed into a good large cluster jewel. This is a very sort of traditional bow or large cluster jewel. I definitely recommend these three. They're not terribly expensive. Honestly, I can't remember how much this kind of large cluster costs, but it should not break the bank too terribly much. You get the mana leech, which is important there. You get a couple of just pretty good damage notables there. And then that'll enable you to put your 2 medium clusters here. We do not have enough passive points, and I don't really feel like dropping other things. It remains to be seen what will happen for the higher end budget, exactly how I'm going to mess with the clusters. But for now, I think the best option here is a large cluster with the 2 mediums in there, and then just leave this one empty. You could potentially maybe try and put a medium cluster in here if you have enough points, and maybe drop a few things here. But there isn't a whole lot here that you can drop that's really worthy to drop. I mean, there's a lot of really good notables and passives here. And I think I said in that other video, I honestly feel like a lot of these passives here for the bower help to carry this build in a big way. Okay, so that is it on the passives. Let's talk about the Atlas passives here. God, I'm trying to think about what sort of changes I made since then. Okay, maybe these might be a little new here. I'm still going Legion. It's still making a lot of currency. I think it's one of the best outright currency earning strategies as far as a league mechanic is concerned. I do believe I blocked Heist now. I don't even want to mess with it, really. And yeah, Dance with Destruction might be new as well. Basically, there's nothing that's changed here. We're still going 100% all in on Shrines. We're going all in on Strongbox. We're doing Eater of World Altars. We're going basically all in on Legion. And Delirium, I guess. Trying to crank up the Delirium chance by blocking other things and getting a few extra points here. The next move, by the way, in case you're wondering, is going to be where I'll put the rest of these points. Is I'm going to drop a few of the Legion nodes, and I'm going to try to get 2 of the Beyond wheels there. So Beyond, getting some Beyond on every map is going to be in the works for moving forward. But for now, in the medium budget, not doing that because you don't want to make the maps too scary. Basically, however many Atlas points you have is going to depend on how completed your quantity wheel is here. I think that's kind of basically what I want to say on that. All right, so I got a map here. I'm going to showcase. I'm going to drop that back out here. And a pretty nice one here, just fairly representative of what it looks like when I run an 8 mod corrupted map. I typically run the 8 mod corrupted map sextant until I have self-sustained all the maps I need to self-sustain. Then you can see the sextants here. We got a Legion, we got Strongbox, doubling up on those because they give me Brother Stashes. Yes, I have seen a double Brother Stash drop this league already one time. I believe I farmed, I did a 32 map session somewhat recently, got 3 Brother Stashes out of it, and that was like a 12x an hour farm for me, so that was a lot of fun, and that's one of the reasons I can afford Omniscience now. And so yeah, let's get this run in here. It's gonna look very similar to the same thing I did last time, except, you know, just doing a lot more damage and a fair bit more tanky. One thing I actually forgot to mention here, speaking of being tanky, is the other regret that I might have about the previous video I made. So regret number 1, if you will, is not going Divergent Dash almost immediately to actually get phasing in a fairly simple way. Regret number 2 would be Windward. So I actually really like this Ascendancy point. It is something that again, very few people even talk about. I think it's very much a black sheep ascendancy point for the Deadeye ascendancy. Now, the meta for Tornado Shot is to get Ricochet up to Endless Munitions, to go Gathering Winds, and then to get Focal Point. The problem with Focal Point is that when you're mapping and you got monsters on 360 degrees, they're firing at you from off screen and everything, very few of those monsters are actually affected by nearby marked enemy, which, by the way, you can't even control which enemy is marked. It's just some random rare enemy that you hit in the map because of how mark on hit support works. So let's talk about Windward. What does it do? It gives 3% less damage taken per gale force right there. So you have 10 gale forces. That's 30% less damage taken. That's its own multiplier, so that's really huge. Now, the big downside here is that you lose all gale forces when hit. Gale force, basically, the way that functions is that your tailwind gives you 8% increased action speed, and then when you have 10 stacks of gale force, you go from 8% all the way up to 12% increased action speed. So you really don't want to lose your gale force, obviously. You will naturally lose it a little bit over time. But here's the thing. Again, in the spirit of just kind of the dynamic and tactical gameplay of this type of style, especially with how I got the endurance charges, the rampage working, you know, it's all working in favor of moving through the map quickly, killing everything quickly, never a dull moment, always attacking. And when you have a lot of Soul Eater buffs from the Soulthirst, which is obviously playing into that, you attack God knows how many times a second. And guess what? Every single attack gives you a Gale Force. So even if you're getting hit constantly, which by the way, you don't get hit constantly with this build. I mean, you have a lot of evasion on your character, and you should be laterally moving around so spells aren't hitting you constantly anyway. Like I said, when you're getting hit, you will immediately go back up to 10 Gale Force if you're attacking the whole time. So this helps promote a little bit more of the stand your ground and fire strategy. It's also really nice because you're going to take a lot less damage from damage over time, which is actually one of the more dangerous things to deal with while you're mapping on this character. So I do want to point that out. I'm definitely a big fan of Windward, although it absolutely requires that you're even more active in the map, which is, you know, a little bit challenging. You got to focus, and you can't just fall asleep at the wheel. So let's see if I can pull that off. We'll see what that looks like. So I go into the map. I actually start killing right away. I want to get some headhunter buffs if I can via the inspired learning. And so I'm much tankier now. Oh wow, a major acceleration speed shrine. What do you know? I'm figuring out a place to use my sentinel. There we go. There we go. Now look at that. That's a nice little explosion, isn't it? I kept killing everything with rampage there for a second. That boss was possessed, by the way, and he still died that fast. Now normally I don't do legions until I have my gloom shrine, but I see the timing of my flask buffs here, and I know that I'm super busted right now with over 400 Soul Eater stacks. I can easily clear this entire legion right now. I've already reset the flasks here, and even now that I'm at my weakest point here, with the flasks reset, Soul Eater buffs reset, I'm still killing stuff very quickly. It is in large part thanks to the acceleration speed shrine, which is something I really hope to see anytime I'm in the maps. Definitely. Definitely hope to see that buff. Okay, so once again, I got another legion. I should probably have gotten a gloom shrine before I did that. I think I will actually go over and get a gloom shrine now. I love seeing the rarity and quantity altars, of course. Those are always great to see. I don't know where that thing... Oh, right down here. Well, typical story of my life there. The very last shrine I find is a gloom shrine. Ain't that how it always goes? God, that's a lot of extra quantity. I don't know. I guess we could see a brother stash drop, but, you know, probably not. Okay, there's a breach here I opened a while back. I almost missed it, but you can see the gloom shrine and how everything worked there. I absolutely just cleared like all of that thing in the split second last moment available there. I can probably get this legion to open quicker than normal. Yeah, it looks like I did. I think I will go down here and open this breach, but see, I'm moving so fast through the map. I can go ahead and come back up here, clear the legion now, and then come back down here and do this breach. In fact, I have extra time. I'm just going to start looting because the map is basically done. The map is done. That was a very well executed map. I got the map boss done quickly. I got a lot of altars. I got some very high value altars. I didn't get supremely lucky with any great drop. No exalted orbs, no brother stashes. I got a lot of good legions. I got 3 legions on that map, which is pretty typical since we're blocking a lot of stuff. We get 1 legion from the sextant, we get 1 legion from the scarabs, and then we get another legion like half the time from other stuff. So yeah, we're just kind of looting stuff. And again, with a major acceleration speed shrine, it also greatly improves the looting speed. So this is kind of best case scenario here. You remember I hit that shrine very early on in the map. It looks like I might have got a second round of that speed shrine there. And there just doesn't appear to be any monsters left on the map now, does there? So I will have my POB linked down below. I'll have the Atlas passives linked down below. I think I will also link my loot filter so you can see where that is. I have done quite a bit of work on my loot filter. I kind of downplayed that. Actually, a great deal of my work was done on the loot filter there. somewhat recently, so that's kind of nice. Oh, currency reward one there. That's good. It's very good. That. Let's see what this one is. Currency reward with unique reward. Well, I'll take that too. I'm not going to make a video about how to do sentinel. I don't think Grimrow and company have already done that. I kind of just follow what those guys say for the most part. But now here's another thing that's really cool. So I was back down to moving at regular run speed, but here I am now with a, I don't know, 40-second duration Quicksilver Flask. So isn't that kind of nice? That's really cool. Actually, I kind of like Legion rewards now. Now my loot filter is tight enough that I usually don't actually run out of space, but here apparently, evidently I did run out of space. So I'll come back in and I'll finish looting that map, but usually every single monster is dead in there and they all died like super crazy fast. So there it is. There's the showcase of a map done correctly with Sentinel, with all the shrines, with the obviously the Soulthirst in action, getting over 400 stacks. You're able to see with the Gloom Shrine, you're able to see it just obliterate everything. I'm not even wearing Omniscience yet, and I'm about to, like literally tonight, going to put it on, and that is going to give me that's going to effectively, I don't know, triple my damage maybe. It's hard to say, so we'll see. I'm very much looking forward to that, so I'm glad to have gotten this video done and out of the way here. This was part 2, so medium budget. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 exalts. Now the exact, again, I want to reiterate this one last time, the exact POB you're seeing right there, the exact gear I have, the exact gems, flasks and everything, definitely more than 20 exalts is put in there. When I say 15, 20 exalts, again, you might have to go back through and listen to it again, but I was kind of talking about some other corners you can cut. For example, the flasks don't have to be as good as what I have. The ring I have doesn't have to be quite that good. The cluster jewels I was using don't have to be quite that good. You can cut a few corners there and save a lot of currency if you want to. But you know what? You're probably going to be making so much currency anyway, doing something similar to what you just saw me do, that who cares, right? It doesn't really matter because you're just going to make all that currency back up either way. So, if you have any questions, you know the comments are where they're at. You can go ahead and post your question there. You can go ahead and give me any kind of comments. If you want to give some praise for the build, if you want to give some criticism for the build, I'm all ears. I welcome anything and everything on that. I appreciate you guys checking out the video. And I am about to get that Omniscience, so I'm excited. That's my next move. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.